on the broken slopes of arid ruin, with the last alliance victorious and Sauron struck down, the fate of every age to come balanced in a single moment. Isildur, heir of Elendil, stood inside the fiery heart of Mount Doom. In his hand was the One Ring, the master instrument of Sauron's power, the core of his spirit, and the source of ages of torment across Middle-earth. History tells us that Isildur chose to keep it, but today we ask the question, what if he didn't? What if Isildur, standing before the crack of doom, let the ring fall into the fire? What if Sauron's power was ended and not merely diminished in the Second Age? And what kind of world would rise from a single choice? This is one of Tolkien's greatest lost possibilities, and it begins at the very end of the Second Age. According to Tolkien's writings in the Silmarillion and in letters, the One Ring was the absolute linchpin of Sauron's existence. His spirit, his will, and a portion of his native divine power was poured into it. When Isildur refused to destroy the ring, he allowed that power to endure, and with it, the possibility of Sauron's return. But imagine a different choice. Imagine Isildur listening to the pleas of Elrond and Círdan. Imagine him gazing into the fire, recognizing the weight of history resting on his shoulders, and letting the ring slip from his fingers into the fire. The destruction of the ring in this moment would unleash a catastrophic spiritual shockwave. Tolkien writes that the foundations of Barad-dûr were built with the power of the ring itself. Without that power, the fortress collapses completely, not just partially as seen in the films. The physical and metaphysical body of Sauron disintegrates. Unlike in the Third Age, where his spirit survives as a shadow, here Sauron would be utterly annihilated. His essence, unanchored, would dissolve, unable to reform. In Tolkien's metaphysics, this is the closest thing to permanent death a Maya can suffer. At the very dawn of the Third Age, the world would find itself without a Dark Lord for the first time since Morgoth's fall. When Sauron falls permanently, the consequences are imminent and world-shaping. The Nazgûl, whose existence depended entirely on the domination of the One Ring, would cease instantly. No retreat, not fade, they would be unmade. All nine, including the Witch King, vanishing from Middle-earth. There would be no rise of Minas Morgul, no Wraith Lord haunting the north, and no lingering terror poisoning the Third Age. Mordor itself would collapse into silence. Without Sauron's will binding orcs, trolls, and corrupt spirits into an army, the land becomes an empty, forsaken wasteland. The great orc breeding pits of the Second Age depended on his organisation and presence. Unaided, they would fracture and fall in ill fighting. The power of Barad-dûr, bound to the ring's sorcery, would break apart entirely. Mordor's role as a centre of darkness would end forever. Most importantly, the last alliance does not dissolve into exhaustion and disillusionment, because Sauron's threat is permanently extinguished. Men and elves do not return home to prepare for the next war. They would return home victorious, confident that no new shadow will rise in the east. It is a definitive end to the Second Age, not merely a pause before a darker time. The destruction of the ring reshapes the destiny of the Dúnedain more than any other people. In the real timeline, Gondor and Arnor spend centuries fighting Sauron's remnants. Gondor loses Osgiliath, Minas Ithil is transformed into Minas Morgul, and Arnor collapses entirely under the Witch King's long pressure offensives. But with Sauron gone, in this alternate history, the Dúnedain do not bleed out over 1,000 years. Gondor, instead of entering a long slow decline, becomes a flourishing empire, remnant of Númenor before its fall. Its people retain longer lifespans, for fear of war, and are among the forces of erode Númenorian vitality. Minas Arnor and Osgiliath become true jewels of the West, thriving in peace without the constant threat of invasion. Arnor, whose downfall in the canon timeline was primarily reshaped by the Witch King's hate, remains whole and unified. It does not fracture into Athadan, Cardalan, and Ruador. A strong Arnor changes everything. It keeps northern lands stable, protects London's borders, and maintains a powerful alliance with Rivendell. The line of Isildur remains noble, royal, and visible, not fragmented into wandering ranges. If the ring is destroyed, Aragorn is never born into hardship. His lineage never hides. his kingdom remains whole. The world of men enters a renaissance. Tolkien wrote extensively about the elves being bound to Middle-earth's fading. They do not leave simply because they grow tired. They leave because the shadow corrupts and erodes everything they try to preserve. Galadriel herself states that without the ring's destruction, her realm would dwindle into a rustic folk of dell and cave. But in a world without Sauron, the decay is drastically slowed. Rivendell becomes a thriving sanctuary of lore, not a lasting refuge of ancient memory. Elrond is forced into the role of steward, fighting against the inevitable dusk of his people. Lindon, under Gil-galad's successors, maintains high prestige, and Lothlorien, with no constant threat pressing upon it, becomes a realm of beauty, not a fortress holding back darkness. Most importantly, the 3 elven rings remain safe for much longer. Though their power ultimately fades with the passing of time, they are no longer strained by resisting Sauron's long influence. The elves leave eventually. For Tolkien's instance, their departure is woven into the world's design, but they leave in peace and not in sorrow. Sauron's long shadow contributes significantly to the weakening of Khazad-dûm. Fear, dwindling trade, and the rising darkness in the east all play subtle roles in the dwarves' decision to delve even deeper. The awakening of the Balrog seems inevitable, yet a stronger, more prosperous Khazad-dûm may delay that tragedy for centuries or avoid it altogether. Without pressure from Sauron's influence, the dwarves maintain stronger alliances with both elves and men. Erebor continues unchallenged. Dale thrives. The dwarves do not become an isolated wandering people. The northern realms remain a web of interconnected, prosperous cultures, a stark contrast to the fractured landscape of the Third Age. The most profound and bittersweet change is the absence of the War of the Ring. The great story of the Third Age never happens. Frodo is never called to carry the burden that nearly breaks him. Sam remains a humble gardener and never rises to the heroic heights that define him. Bilbo never finds the ring and never leaves the Shire for Rivendell. Gollum's entire arc, his tragedy, pity, and final redemption by accident, never occurs. Gandalf remains the Grey Pilgrim, but never becomes Gandalf the White, for there is no war to fight. Rohan never enters crisis. Gondor never stands against the shadow. The scoring of the Shire never awakens its people to courage. Tolkien believed that heroes are formed in the crucible of darkness. Without Sauron, the world is safer, but far less mythic. The Third Age becomes peaceful, even idyllic, but the great tales never unfold. This world lacks the very stories that give Tolkien's legendarium its beating heart. So we ask the question, is this a better world? In many ways, yes, Middle-earth prospers, culture flourishes, darkness does not unite under a single tyrant, the realms of men do not decline, the elves diminish slowly and with dignity, the dwarves retain their ancient strength, and countless lives are saved. But something essential is lost. For Tolkien, struggle and sacrifice give meaning to history. Frodo's journey, Aragorn's return, and the union of unlikely companions. These emerge only from the age of hardship. Without Sauron, the world is peaceful. But the great, soul-defining stories of courage never arise. It is a beautiful world, but it is not one that Tolkien chose to give us. This is a Middle-earth that could have been, a world healed entirely at the cost of its greatest legends. Let me know in the comment section down below if there are any more alternative realities that you'd like me to look into, like what if the dwarves reclaimed all 7 rings? And what if Sauron had forged the ring earlier or never forged it at all? There are countless options for me to go down here, so if you want to see those, just let me know. Down in the description you'll find a link to my other channel, where if you're here normally for my Warhammer lore on Fridays, then you'll love it over there, because over there we are building, painting, and soon battling Warhammer armies against each other. We are now streaming, and that includes painting streams and even streaming games of Warcry, so if you want to see that, then just hop on over there. Anyway, that'll be it from me today. A wonderful day, or night, wherever you are in the world. And as always, bye for now, guys.